Welcome, everybody. So as Abby said, I've kind of spent my career on both the operating side as a founder and a CEO. I was a venture investor for about 7 years, done some angel investing. I've spent some time in big companies as well. So I was acquired twice, and so 3 times actually. First part of my career, I worked for IBM. I worked for a startup in Cambridge that was acquired later by IBM. I said I wasn't going to do that a second time. And then I built a startup that was acquired, another startup that was acquired by Documentum that was acquired by EMC. So I've done kind of both sides. I've also lived on kind of the early startup era, if you want to call that the 80s and 90s, and then kind of the current kind of startup era. And I think what I realize is the world has changed a lot. And I want to, and so when Abby asked me to do this presentation, there have been a lot of thoughts kind of in the back of my mind of how the world is different and how you would build a startup team in today's environment differently than it had been done in the previous decade or the decade before that. And so it gave me an excuse to put some thoughts down on paper. I also used it as an opportunity to reach out to about a dozen entrepreneurs in the community here in New England, in Boston. Didn't go out west this time because I wanted to just gather their thoughts on kind of what they thought was different about building their teams, what they thought worked and didn't work. And I tried to capture some of that in this presentation as well. So the thesis behind this is building your startup team is different than building a team in a large organization, and it's different today building a team than perhaps it was a decade ago, I think. I think the world has changed. And I'm going to go through that a little bit. As I wrote the presentation, I realized, though, there's no one answer. And so this has to be something that you take kind of a framework and a set of concepts and apply it to your unique situation. This is not going to be a recipe book, I need to do A, B, and C. It doesn't feel like that. It should be a set of questions that you ask yourself about your unique particular situation. But Abby and I talked last minute about a day and a half ago to try and make this a little interactive. So we have 3 teams that are here that have volunteered to kind of join us to see if we can apply the framework on the spot and see whether it's helpful, not helpful, whether it uncovers some new thinking or not within those particular organizations. At that point in time, I think we'll open it up to a set of questions too if people want to ask of the team or of me. This is the first time we've done this pitch, so there may be a few rough edges, so bear with us there, okay? So how many people have startup teams that look like this? I did once. Fancy walls, raised $5–10 million of venture investment, people with fancy titles. I don't think I ever wore a tie to work, though. Well, maybe I did early on. Maybe a show of hands. How about more like this? Right? Okay, and this is more fun, isn't it? I mean, this is what one of my topics will be, building a cohesive team. This helps, as you can see. I want to, though, take a step back in time. When I was putting together this pitch, I'm a pack rat, and I keep things from different eras. And I found this video that I candidly have not looked at. I won't tell you the date until we play it. But I found this video, and I realized that building startup teams and building a startup culture and hiring great people and kind of building a team that can go take the hill has been in my blood from the beginning. So with that, let me roll this video.
This is New England Cable News. Now, from New England's own 24-hour news channel, this is New England Cable News.
From our business page, what corporate America will do to attract and keep good workers. The high-tech industry is suffering from a shortage of talent. At least that's the word from top executives in the industry. But things are different at one Massachusetts software maker. New England Cable News business reporter Mont Finnell explains.
So we go for firepower.
Glenn McDonald is blowing off a little steam. When the pressure of work builds, or when he just wants to have a little fun, he just fires away.
Obviously, you wouldn't be doing this in a company like IBM, or would you?
Well, I would, but probably not for very long.
McDonald's part of a growing number of companies that are making their workplace environment a little bit more like home.
We believe if people are enjoying what they're working on, decisions happen more quickly, you make better decisions, people work harder, people feel more empowered.
So at Instinctive Technology, employees open the door to a fully stocked fridge. New hires are given $50 to get stuff for the office, like these lights, a toaster oven or a coffee grinder. Workers are provided with more desk space than at most companies. They even have the choice of whether they'd rather have a more powerful computer or a bigger screen.
I said, that's a nice little touch. I mean, here, a lot of times just you show up and here's your machine, you had no say in what it is.
Employees get 3 weeks vacation, extra holidays, and stock options. Partly to avoid conflicts, workers don't have titles. They're encouraged to work at home, and they don't have to attend meetings unless they want to.
It allows for individuals to say, I could be spending my time in a more valuable way by doing something else. And they can get up and do that. And that's why we make sure that meetings don't run on endlessly, that meetings have agendas and are decision and action focused and aren't a waste of time.
When Jeffrey Beir and Pito Salas co-founded Instinctive Technology 7 months ago, they quickly learned that in order to find qualified workers, their corporate environment had to be different.
That's the bottom line. Just merely a competitive salary and benefits package isn't enough to attract the great employees that you need to hire.
In fact, in Massachusetts over the past 2 years, the supply of available software engineers and programmers has nearly dried up. With a rebounding economy, the number of people working in the software industry has grown from 95,000 to 130,000. Lately, there haven't been enough qualified people to fill the positions. When the company started out,
if I received word of a candidate, I had to get back to them within a matter of a day or two. Otherwise, candidates were already speaking with other companies or taken off the market within a matter of 3 to 4 days.
Now, the developer of Internet Business Solutions says it has a bevy of qualified people coming to it, faxing in resumes and applying for jobs on the company's webpage.
Actually, I came here so much based on the culture that I didn't even know what the product was before I made my decision to come here.
No kidding. But Instinctive hasn't fulfilled all its goals. It had wanted to give everybody their own private offices. In the end, several are ending up in cubicles. Again, the problem is that the area's high-tech economy is so hot now that spacious, affordable real estate is hard to find.
Between cost, location, size, and arrangements, you have only so much choice.
In the coming year, Instinctive Technology expects to double its number of employees. And one more perk. If you're already an employee here, the company will pay you $1,000 for each person you refer to them who ends up getting a job here. In Cambridge, Massachusetts, Mont Fennell, New England Cable News.
I actually hadn't watched it beginning to end until now. I started and I said, I'll save it for later. But back then, $1,000 was a lot of money. But we were pushing the edge back then. There's some ideas that are new and creative and worked, and some that clearly would never work today. So I think things have shifted a little bit. I'll say one last little tidbit. This aired prime time, dinner hour, several times, as NECN does, all night long. And I got a few phone calls from my investors after this ran. Now, this is before we'd announced our product, so we were still kind of heads down building the product. We didn't have a whole lot to talk about, but we needed to hire. So we were able to convince NECN we were cool and different. They came and did this piece. And I got a voicemail from one of my investors that said, Jeffrey, what are you doing there? Are you building a country club? So investors will tell you they invest in teams, and they believe about culture, and they believe about cohesive environment, and they really don't, because this was really intended to attract employees, which is really all it was about. But we did a bunch of cool things, right? Some of them I'd never do today. So that was just for fun. And you caught the date on it. I didn't realize the date was in it. So it was 1997. That's a while ago. Here's what we're going to talk about today. First, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but startups are different. There's a lot we need to figure out. You need to be nimble. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And the world is different today. And I think there are ways to build teams that are very innovative and very novel, and we're going to touch on a few of those, and I hope to learn some from folks here today as well. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of how do you get into the unique requirements of your business, and how do you build your startup team, and then, as I said, we're going to do some case studies, okay? So this is an unlikely startup org chart, clearly, right? Candidly, I'm not sure how anything gets done in the State Department given an org chart like this, because I don't understand how to operate in that environment. But I will say, I have seen startup org charts that look like this. So this is not as humorous, right? As it said in the kind of the preview, this is really not about the org chart, but I think this represents kind of a core problem of some startups that I see, which is there's a little bit of a sense on role and responsibility and less around accountability and what needs to get done. And that's what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today, okay? So talking a little bit about kind of startups and later stage companies, there's a couple people that I've worked with, Catherine Catlin and Booja Cookman, that have this framework for the stages of growth of companies and what they call the spin cycle that happens at different stages of growth. And there's a natural thing that happens in companies where the organization and the structure you put in place in the early days around the startup, where you're developing the product and getting initial market feedback, needs to change as you scale it, as you go to market, as you get revenue, as you start to hire distributed people in the field. And it'll change again when you start to broaden out and go worldwide, and you start to build multiple levels into the management structure, perhaps as you're getting to be profitable and you're opening new divisions. And it'll change again when you get to multiple products and multiple markets as a large company. We're going to focus kind of in the first two sections, primarily the first, but then a little bit into the second as well. And Catherine and Booja's thesis here is the structure of the team and the structure of leadership and how the team interacts with each other changes at each of these each of these levels. Have anybody seen this before, anything like this? They actually have a wonderful book out. It's a little dated, but there's a lot that kind of is relevant still today. In the early days, everybody's a doer. Everybody wears multiple hats. The core team works as an integrated whole. It's kind of amorphous. It's not structured like an org chart. As you start to grow a little bit, you might start to bring on some functional hires, but there's still very much a kind of tight, cohesive organization, even if you begin to get distributed. The leader, the CEO, is still very intimate in lots of decisions. It's not a delegation and a step away. And frankly, you're having functional leaders that take on kind of broad leadership responsibilities themselves and taking on ownership outside their functional lines. I won't go beyond that up the chart because it's not as relevant to us right now. So we'll focus on the bottom two stages here, okay? So early stage is different than later stage. From a world perspective, a lot's changed since 1997. And just going back and looking at kind of how I would have done things differently back in my first startup, a lot of changes in people. I mean, maybe every generation says this, but when I think about the Gen Y generation, the 20-somethings, and kind of their motivations, I have a son that's 21, so I get that firsthand. But then I have a teenage daughter also, and I get how she thinks. Very different expectations of work, of acknowledgement, of kind of what keeps them engaged, and job frequency changes. I see this in a lot of startups where there's not that long-term commitment that there was in my parents' generation, clearly, but it's even heading more in the direction of, I'm here for a while to work on a project, have some fun, deliver something, and then I'm out of here doing something else. Very different mindset around people and how you create loyalty and how you create job fulfillment for those people. The world from a geographic standpoint is very different. I mean, today we have people in Europe, in South America, in the Middle East working with us, and it works great, but we have to work at it. And we get a lot of value out of doing that, so we'll talk about that today. The concept of virtual work and collaboration across time zones and boundaries is an important part of what we're trying to do as we build companies today. The economics also are very different in different geographies. You need to be sensitive to that. Obviously, the cultural differences are very different geographies. You need to figure out kind of what works for, a 20-something in Cambridge is going to be very different than perhaps somebody in Argentina. Business models and how we generate revenue is very different today. Many more ways that we can do so. When I did eRoom, we could have somebody on the phone calling to sell, or we could have somebody in the field calling on a customer. That was about it. We started some freemium stuff, but that was very early, and we started letting people go online and self-subscribe, but it didn't exist. Today, think about all the different ways that you can generate revenue and you can generate sales. And a lot of this, we all know you can't do all of that. You've got to narrow it down and figure out what are your core business models, what are your core distribution mechanisms that you're going to get to work. And that's going to drive the kind of company, the kind of startup team that you need to build as well. Pace of change is crazy. So that, you heard in the video, that was 7 months in to the founding of eRoom, and we still hadn't shipped a product yet, right? It took us, we did it in 9 months. We shipped our first product in 9 months, and that was considered fast at the time. Today, 9 months is an eternity, right? And we needed to raise $3.5 million in our Series A to get the first product to beta. That'd be nuts today. You'd never be able to do that. So it's a different world in terms of pace, in terms of how you experiment and iterate in the marketplace and work with clients and customers, about products becoming instantly available when you want to deliver them. It's not about a deployment and install and a configure and an integration. It's in the cloud, and I subscribe, and I'm going, and I configure it myself. And I'm going to touch on a little bit more some of the whole Agile methodologies around pace as well, which translates into benefit and a lot of added complexity to how you build your startup. You're doing it with the customer in hand. You're iterating. You're getting feedback along the way. You're not kind of putting a plan in place and putting your heads down and building for 9 months. Technology, I don't need to spend a lot of time on the technology because we all know it. A lot of the technology's changed, and it enables many different opportunities in terms of products and solutions that we can create. We would have never considered back then going internationally in the beginning. Today, there are lots of businesses that start internationally and come back to the US, or they find the right market where they know there's a better opportunity to start there, or they start in multiple markets at once. That adds complexity to your team. And then one of my passion areas, I think the whole financing world has changed and is continuing to change dramatically. How we get funded, where capital comes from, what investors are looking for. We'll touch on this a little bit more later, but we need to be much more creative about capital efficiency, kind of smaller amounts of capital to get to proof points before we go further along, okay? So back in the 90s, there was a wonderful book called Built to Last that was about kind of what went into great companies that were built to last a long time. And I kind of just skimmed through the book again just to remind myself of what was there. I would be hard-pressed to have a startup look at what's in there and say that you should focus on much of it. And it did a lot of traditional waterfall company building. I mean, in those days, we approached it the way we approach software development, with kind of a focus on the market and a mission and core values and 10-year objectives and 3-year goals and strategic initiatives and culture and alignment and all this kind of stuff, and then plans, and you executed that. That's not going to work, right? I like to say, in this world of kind of capital constraints and time to market pressures and competition coming from all over the world, a constrained hiring environment, you need to think very differently about this phase of building your company. And what I like to say to people is, what are you going to do that allows you, what are you going to do that proves that you can live another day? So it's a short-term mindset. It's not to say that the long-term isn't important, but it's much more focused on what do I need to get done to convince an investor to put in more money, to get a customer to buy, to get kind of a win out in the marketplace. That's the mindset we're going to take today in terms of how we're building our culture, okay, and our team. So I mentioned in the beginning, Abby and I did a pitch earlier in the year on kind of taking the Agile software development mindset and bringing that to how you build your company. And the principles of Agile really form the foundation for how you build your company. I think I'm trying to, in this presentation, extend it to how you build your team. So Agile is about iterating, doing things incrementally, a little bit at a time, iteratively, learning as you go. Getting something out there, putting it in front of people, getting feedback, and making appropriate changes. Deferring decisions that don't need to be made today, that can be made tomorrow. We can't get it all done. We have to decide this is important now. I'm going to wait on that when that's not important. Not deferring all decisions, deferring those decisions that you can defer. Delivering fast, executing quickly. We need to know, are we going in the right direction, and iterate and get that feedback quickly. We can't get the feedback after 9 months and realize that we're going in the wrong direction. And doing the stuff that matters, not the stuff that doesn't matter. So trying not to focus on things that don't matter, like the color of the sofas in the lobby, okay? So Abby and I took this from kind of traditional Agile methodology, and we translated it into how do you build your company? And I'm not going to go through this whole pitch, but I said to Abby, we need to do this pitch again, because there's a lot of good stuff here. The 6 elements that we built for how you build your company is first starting with a vision. So this is not only about short term, it's about what do you aspire to be? And we're going to do that when we do the exercise today. We're going to start with what do you aspire to be? Because that's important for a number of reasons. And it's not just about pivoting your way into something. That's not what we're talking about. But taking that vision and focusing it down. Focusing it onto something that you can execute in a short period of time and get feedback on it. It's about being very clear about the risks that you face and building your plans around reducing that risk. And it's about, as we talked about, kind of making decisions that incrementally increase the value of your company in every step of the way, whether it's proof point with a customer, momentum in the marketplace, maybe it's revenue, maybe it's a set of metrics that you need to have to prove to an investor that you're a worthy investment, okay? Figuring out in what order do you do things, right? In this capital constrained world, we can't do everything all at once. Actually, the hardest startup I ever had was in 1999 when capital was effectively free, money was easy to raise, we had more money than we needed to do, there were no constraints on the problem. It was too hard to execute in that environment. I'd much rather execute in an environment where you're constrained and you're forced to make decisions of what I have to do today and what can wait till tomorrow. But building that ordering, the sequencing of A, B, and C takes a lot of art. And then finally, building in flexibility. That we're not going to get it all right in the beginning. You need to kind of learn, make changes, course correct. We call it pivot occasionally. Pivot's a big word. Flexibility can be kind of minor course corrections along the way, okay? So that was the framework that Abby and I did in a couple-hour presentation. I just did it in 30 seconds. So, but I want to translate that into how to use this to build your team, because I think there's a lot of relevant kind of basis here to do so. So with this Agile mindset, let me talk about the imperatives for building your team. And we're going to spend the bulk of this time now on kind of these imperatives. So the first, in terms of the Agile mindset, was vision. And the first kind of imperatives is attracting awesome talent to your team. Awesome talent that brings, complementary skills, who share that excitement and the vision. So a big part of why we do vision is to attract people that share that vision. I'm going to get into each of these in a little bit more detail. But as I said, the vision is not, you can't execute the vision, you've got to focus it down. There's a real key challenge around your team building, which is focusing down on what we need to do for the next milestone, getting everybody aligned on what we need to do and what we don't need to do so that we don't have people running renegade and going off and working on things that aren't core to the next milestone. Creating a learning organization. So creating an organization that knows how to work in the marketplace and take feedback and embrace it, not fight it. That's a challenge when you think about how you build your team. And we all know some people that like to, I committed, I'm doing that, I'm not moving from that. Okay? How do you create an organization that's a learning organization and is willing to take in that input? Building a cohesive team. These startups are tough, right? It can get very charged. We'll hear some today from some of the teams. There are difficult moments. There's not a lot of room for individual ego in startup teams, right? There's a real goal here is to kind of everybody be pulling in the direction of the company collective win, not the individual win. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And we make mistakes. We won't get it right from the beginning. So how do we create an organization and a culture where we embrace those difficult decisions and we make them crisply and we move on to the next level? Whether those be, oops, we did something wrong, or the opportunity has changed and grown and we need to change the organization to take advantage of that opportunity, okay? As I said in the Agile methodology, embracing flexibility is not easy. Creating a culture that does that is a difficult thing to do. It's about how you hire, it's about the mindset, it's about the rewards, it's about a number of things you do with your company. And thriving in good times is easy. One of the first startups I worked with was Lotus Development, and we were kind of a little like the Google of our day. We had this huge revenue stream over here called 123 that generated massive revenue, so that everything else in the company, good or bad or ugly, was a success, at least in our minds, but it really wasn't. So you've got a culture that embraces flexibility when things go bad and the team comes together, okay? And then lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about how do we embrace the younger generation, Gen Y, and now I've learned there's a Gen Z. I don't know what we're going to do next. Gen Z is our teenagers that don't care about privacy, live in the social world, different mindset. I don't want to appear old, but that's a head scratch a little bit for me. So that's our framework, and I'm going to dive in a little bit more detail on that, okay? All right, so how do you attract awesome talent with complementary skills who share an excitement for the company vision, okay? First and foremost, I think you have to build a company that people want to work for, or better yet, even want to brag to their friends about, okay? This is about attracting great talent. I think I have a thesis that great talent attracts more great talent. Weak talent attracts very weak talent. So I think focusing on kind of who you bring into the company that share that vision, that can help bring others onto the company is pretty key. I also believe, and I'm going to share some other quotes from some of my buddies here, my friends, hiring for aptitude over experience in this stage. That's not to say experience isn't valuable, but in this early stage when we're trying to build for flexibility and we're trying to be a learning organization, having people that can wear many hats and are willing to kind of clean the dishes today and take out the garbage tomorrow is pretty key. Don Buellens, who's the CEO of Unidesk, multi-time successful entrepreneur, known Don for about 30 years. One of my least favorite VC buzz phrases is domain expertise. The other, he says, is pivot, but that's not relevant. He says, while some amount of relevant experience can be extremely valuable, I think many entrepreneurs and investors backing them often overvalue domain expertise when building their teams. Many times such people bring a set playbook or a been there, done that attitude, and I know what to do mindset to the company, which prevents them from being open to learning what's unique, what's different about the company, and what it will take to succeed. Don greatly prefers people who are smart, hungry, intellectually curious, and highly self-aware. I concur at this phase. Look for passion. You as a startup person, as a startup CEO, founder, are doing this for more than just there's a market opportunity and financial gain potentially in the future. You're doing this because this has something meaningful to you in here. I think you want hire people that share that in the early days, because this is hard, and it will get hard. And having people that are doing it willing to keep driving because this is their mission, this is their passion, is something that will provide you a lot of strength going forward. I'll pick on Don here again. Don says, no passion, no job. Entrepreneurship is a quest. Founders are passionate. Therefore, their team must embrace and share that passion. Often entrepreneurs and investors look for the professional executives who can guide the entrepreneurs or scale the business. If these professionals don't become passionate about the product they're bringing to market, run away. Don't be tempted solely by experience or the expertise they can bring. Don actually tells a great story. His prior company, what was it called? It'll come to me. Great success. But Don had no domain experience for this company. He had passion for it. He convinced the team that he could learn it and he could get passionate about it. He became CEO of it. Ecologic was the name of the company. Sold that to Dell for a multi-billion-dollar cash exit a few years ago. And that was about passion. Oops. I like to call this building the whole brain. When you build your early stage company, you don't want to build a team of people that look like you and have the same skills and preferences and experience and kind of decision-making mindset as you. You want to bring people on the team that have very skills, very perspective, very backgrounds, different strengths and weaknesses. Diversity does create better decisions. In that conflict, which sometimes isn't fun, often what comes out of that is better decisions. And as long as, we'll touch on this in a bit, but as long as you keep the respect and you understand where people are coming from, I think understanding people's backgrounds and why they are the way they are helps breed that good dialogue that needs to happen. And you need to think about the team as a cohesive whole, not as one brain, but as a whole brain, where you have realists and optimists. You know, nobody wants to be the negative naysayer in the room, but that person plays a role that keeps the people that heads are in the clouds from kind of dreaming that this is going to happen. Let's get real about what can get done. The creative folks that see lots of solutions but can't get pinned down on which one it is, they need people to get their feet on the ground. So as you build your team, you're thinking about how will that dynamic organism come together and help you be a stronger brain, okay? All this comes down to polishing your hiring process. Hiring shouldn't be something that you take kind of, just as something that takes your time. I need to do it, I'll do an interview. This needs to be core, not only the CEO's job, but everybody in the company's job. What are you looking to hire? What skills you need to bring on? What types of people are you looking to bring on? I hate, culture fit, I struggle with another way to put it. This is not about someone who looks like us and matches us, right? It's about someone that will help build the collective organization, bring something unique to the team, okay? Brian Halligan, CEO of HubSpot. Avoid the press release hire. If you hire someone who has a long pedigree and you're proud of that and you issue the press release, you've probably hired the wrong person. I like that one. Always be recruiting. I think if we're hiring for aptitude over experience, when that person comes along that brings those relevant skills and background and passion, we want to be in a position to hire that person, not if the job opening isn't there yet. Clearly, there are financial implications of doing so, but if you're always recruiting and the team is always recruiting, when that talent comes along, you want to be able to get that person. Diane Hessen was a pro at this. She was always in recruiting mode, and her whole team was always in recruiting mode. And lastly, it's everybody's job. It's not just the CEO's job. It's not just the hiring manager's job. It's every employee's job to kind of help bring people into the company, help bring the right DNA into the company. Paul English, why is hiring so important? Think back to the teams you've run in the past. Think about the best person you've ever managed and the worst person you've ever managed. Let's do more of the former and less of the latter. That pretty much simplifies the whole thing, okay? So this is taking longer than I thought, Abby, I realize, but that's okay. Attracting talent is something that's kind of first and foremost how you build your team. Okay. As we talk, so that's the vision piece of it. That's kind of, we're on this mission. We've got this kind of higher level objective we're trying to achieve. How do we bring it down to reality and get people focused? It needs to be taken down to a set of key initiatives and get everybody on the team aligned around that. So a lot of what I do today is coach early stage teams and going from their big grand vision down to what do we need to get done today and how do we execute that? And how do we get the team now aligned around doing that? And a lot of this is around what are the proof points in the business that we need to get done, whether it's a financing or customer metric or some proof that tells us we're heading in the right direction. Abby and I talked about defining the MVP for your company, your minimal viable product, or what we call your minimal viable company. How do you get down to kind of the core set of things that you need to do? This is not something the CEO does, it's something the team needs to do. What are we doing, what aren't we doing that gets us to that next milestone, okay? Communication and ensuring clarity among the team is critical. It's very easy to veer off. You're tempted by lots of feature creep from a company perspective. You got to be very crisp. This is what we need to get done to achieve this milestone so we put ourselves in a better position to raise money or generate revenue or get customers. And these are the set of things that can wait till tomorrow. We don't need to do this. Let's not spend time on that. Let's eliminate waste. I add this here because it doesn't fit anywhere else, but I believe in the power of a distributed team. And embracing people from different cultures, different parts of the world, getting it to work in a virtual environment, first, it brings great economic benefits. It brings talent that you might not be able to find here, especially as markets get tighter. And I think it helps create a better culture inside the company where you're documenting things are kept clear and in front of people. It's not that things are happening in closed meetings and then nobody hears about it. It has to be documented if you have people that distribute it to know what's going on. Embrace that distributed team. I think it helps you be better as a local team as well. Brian even says the way people work and live has radically changed. We have people that don't want to come into the office. They want to work in an environment that they can be productive in. Well, there's a trust and a working quid pro quo that needs to be there. But if you measure people on what they get done versus FaceTime, you can make that work. Brian says the office is an idea, not a place. Something to keep in mind. I translate it to reward getting stuff done over FaceTime, okay? And I think in this world of cloud-based solutions and distributed teams, kind of rewarding the people that actually move the ball forward versus the people that talk a lot in meetings and show up is I think what we want to kind of encourage. Okay, on to a learning organization. How do we create a learning organization that crisply makes adjustments to the plan, learns in the marketplace, gets feedback, and adjusts to reduce risk and increase value, okay? This is a cultural thing that's not easy to do because there are people we know, people we've worked with that tend to, I committed to that, I'm going to get that done. It's a different mindset. So I like the idea of committing, saying I'm going to get it done, but verifying. Let's make sure what we're doing is the right thing to do and it hasn't changed, right? That was yesterday. Yes, we committed to that, but look what we learned. Competitor announced something here. We have to make a change here. We heard from a customer yesterday, and it now underscores other customers have been telling us we need to make this particular change. Let's make that change. Metrics can be very helpful here. If you're looking at objective data and you're measuring the right things in the marketplace, then it's not an intuitive gut feel, who's ever got the loudest voice, let's make a change. But it's about the metrics telling us it's not working. We need to make a change. Let's try something else that's going to help get those metrics to improve. And communicate them broadly. We'll get into this a little bit more later about trust and confidentiality. But I'm a big believer in getting the metrics out there. Cash position, revenue, customer wins, and getting trust in return that that's kept confidential. Don't automate and scale until it's proven. I see this a lot in startups. Part of it is a lot of startup founders are technical folks and they want to build their product and they want to automate taking credit cards to purchase the product and getting online. It's not important. Let's see if people want it in the first place, right? Let's build something, see if it works, get it out there. Then let's figure out, maybe we can put somebody on the phone and take a credit card and we'll get through it for a little while until we have enough scale that it's painful. Then let's put somebody on it and get it to work. Melissa Leffler, who worked for me at eRoom as VP Engineering at another startup in town, this is I think her 6th startup, build just enough up front. Be smart about scaling. Look for triggers so you know when to build out. So you can define this as part of your metrics. When we hit this particular metric, that's time to hire, that's time to automate, that's time to change the way we do something. Don't do it before then, okay? This also allows for flexibility in learning. If you already built it, and you're taking, you have a big mechanism for taking online purchases and you're not using it, what a waste, what a hard thing to change, versus having somebody that can kind of be nimble and kind of try different things and figure out what works and then automate that. It's a little bit of a funny one, but I think maintaining humility, even in the face of when things work, it's not because we're brilliant, it's not because we're more talented than the next guy, right? It's like, okay, that worked because we thought about it, and we planned, and we got there. If it didn't work, let's take the time to all get together and do an effective postmortem, and let's understand why it didn't work. Learn from that. Learning is about taking risk. Learning is about trying things that you don't know whether it will work or won't work. If you have a culture where people get punished for failure, nobody's going to take a risk. Nobody's going to put their neck out there. So if you can make postmortems a healthy thing, something that makes people feel good, like, okay, we did this, it didn't work, what can we learn from it? Well, we all can learn from it. I think that's a success. If you repeat the same mistake again, that's not a success, though. Okay? A small change today is better than a big change tomorrow. I think this is a little redundant, but tweaking and making little changes, trying different things, a lot easier to do that before we've built too much, right? Make sure that works before we build on it. Melissa says, adjust your process to fit your team, deployment, market stage, customer activity. So I think being smart about where you are, realistic. Again, this is about kind of building over time and sequencing. What do I have to do today and what can I defer till tomorrow? Okay. Building a cohesive team that celebrates the collective win over the individual gain and learns from failure. So celebrating the collective win over the individual gain is something that takes leadership. It takes acknowledgement of, watch the last year's Celtics play, last year's Red Sox play, or 2 years ago Celtics, I should say. There's something powerful that comes of the collective win of the team and the humility that comes from the individual that recognizes it wasn't their sole responsibility for that win. Let's create activities that celebrate that collective win. Diane liked to have rituals. And some of these were silly, and some of these really reinforced the collective win. She found ways to kind of celebrate anything that could be celebrated that was collective in some way. I think that sends the message to everybody. It's my Skype, I guess. I should have shut that off. A cohesive team needs to have trust. And I think the basis for trust is about understanding more about individuals in the company than just they show up for work and they do their job and they go home. I think trust is about what motivates people, where they come from, what their background is, a deeper understanding. And I've seen a lot of great CEOs spend time trying to build that understanding of people within the organization. And there are lots of old school techniques here, retreats and things like that. Some of those work. A lot of it just comes down to really understanding what makes people tick, what motivates people to build that trust. The trust needs to be there. I'll talk about that a little bit more later too. Todd Lufborough, who's the founder of PeopleFluent, great entrepreneur, great CEO. Trust is the foundation of any high-performance team. And without that trust, no collection of great individuals can become a truly great team. It's born out of knowing the members of your team and then them knowing each other. And in setting the tone that you're going to expect high trust and you're going to expect confidentiality. Learning from failure. I said this a little bit in the last slide, but how we learn is by making mistakes. We need to reward failure. We need to kind of make sure that there was some positive that came out of a failure. Yes, something didn't go right and maybe we burned capital where we shouldn't, and we went into we built a feature or went into a market that we shouldn't have done so. But let's learn from that. How do we keep that from happening again? Share the bad news as well as the good news. I am a huge believer in bad information should be distributed quickly. People trust you as a leader so much more if they know you're not sugarcoating things. And if you're bringing to them, we're tight on cash. Here's what we need to do to be able to raise the next round. We all need to pull together to get that done. They know there's nothing else lurking there they don't know about. Nobody wants to come in tomorrow and find out that the company's been shut down, right? They don't want to be surprised by that. So they want to know they're in it with you. There was one quick aside here, and I don't know if this is the best time to do it, but in the early days of one of my startups, I think it was eRoom. Yeah, it was eRoom. We just finished raising the round. We hired about 10 people into the company. We were heads down building the product. We had built a very early prototype, and I was out in the market kind of getting feedback on it. And I was getting very polite feedback on this product. Prospective customers were saying, this is nice, this is kind of cool. Yeah, I could kind of see using that. And I'm coming back all charged up. Isn't this great? Positive feedback, everything's wonderful. And then I went to a customer who I knew would not sugarcoat anything, and he looked at me straight in the eyes and said, you're going to get killed. What you're doing is wrong. The specific thing for the techies in the room, this was back in the mid-90s. We were building a web app with a custom client. He said, you need to be in the browser. Can't be a custom client. Everybody's working in the browser. This is 1996. The browsers were brain dead. There was no way to get an application to work in the browser back then. But I came back and I was petrified because I knew it was wrong. This customer was right. We were building the wrong thing. I'd raised money on the concept. I'd hired a team on the concept. I got the team aligned around it. And I'm sitting here with this thing in my head that's telling me it's wrong. What do I do about it? And I imagined all the worst things that could possibly happen. Stop the presses, we're not building this, we're going to build that, and the team says, Jeffrey, you're crazy, we're out of here, we're going to go do something else, right? Investors saying, what? We gave you money to go do this, now you're changing to go do that? We're out of here, we want our money back. I'm imagining all this stuff. I'm not sleeping at night when this is going on. I had a conversation with, actually, this was one of the more powerful conversations I had with an investor, where he said, we didn't write the check for you to go build that. We wrote the check for you to go chase that market opportunity with a talented team. Go do what you know is right to do. So what did we do? We came back. I came into the company. Pito, my co-founder at the time, he thought I was nuts. But he said, if you think that's right, we're going to make the change. And we got the whole team together and we say, we need to make a change. We need to be in the browser. I don't know how to be in the browser. There's no way. Lots of naysayers in the room. But we came together as a team. We went and approached it looking at 3 or 4 different ways to solve the problem. We came back, we presented to each other in a couple days. Here's a couple of alternatives. We found a brilliant answer. We were the first to ever get an app working in the browser in the mid-90s. And the team came together stronger than it had ever been. And we didn't lose a second in the marketplace because we were stronger, we were moving faster. Sorry for that aside, but that's pretty powerful. Diane says here, complete openness. I think I've done that. Let's move on. Embrace the difficult decisions. So we will all make mistakes, and as the company grows, there's going to be a need to make changes. Or if things change in the marketplace, they're going to need to be reason to make changes. Sometimes you've hired somebody who was great in the early days, and they're not keeping up. The market opportunity's gotten bigger, the job's gotten bigger, they're not the right person. They're not a bad person. The world has changed. Usually, you're not the only one that knows this. Usually others in the company know it, and it's pretty clear to everybody that maybe this individual's not in the right job, or the job's outgrown them, or maybe they don't fit in the company anymore. And it's a difficult thing to do, especially as a young entrepreneur, a young CEO, young founder. Hardest thing you can do, especially if it's someone that you brought onto your team that shares the passion, shares the vision, sacrificed to join the team. It's very hard. But we all know it's better for the common good. And I actually tell my lawyers to go away when it comes to this, even though they like to tell you there's ways to do this. I believe there's a way to be respectful of the individual and help them move on to the next thing and recognize what they brought to the company at this stage, and that looking forward, for the health and value of the company, we need to bring somebody else in to do that job. So you'll hear this from lots of CEOs. This is not new, but fire fast. We all make hiring mistakes. People that don't scale well try and compensate for their deficiencies. I mean, God forbid if it's poor performers or poor attitudes, that's a different thing. That's poison. But good people trying their best, not the right fit, more difficult decision. Diane says, holding on to non-performers for too long lowers the standards for everybody in the company. So this is still about keeping that high-performing, cohesive team. Yes? Yeah.
So you were saying that trying to do this, like, to maintain some respect for the person, and people don't like the lowering of the boom, like, oh, you're gone. So in terms of having to let someone go, do you give them a runway, or is it pretty abrupt?
You know, I think it's case by case specific. I think, are there lawyers in the room? The lawyers are going to tell you one way to approach the problem. All I will say is, put your human being hat on as well and balance the lawyer view. And make a decision, because you're going to take a risk. You take a risk every day. How much risk are you willing to take around this individual? If you believe this person is going to be litigious or is going to go nuts, listen to your lawyer. If you believe this is someone who is part of the team and it's going to be very difficult, but they will see the common good and the wisdom of doing it, put your human being hat on. Okay? And then in terms of longevity and paying somebody, that has to be case specific. You might not have the capital to do so. What do you do about their equity? There's lots of specific things that you need to do there. But just recognize the lawyers have a particular job, and the only counterbalance to the lawyer is your sense of human decency. And the lawyers don't like me saying that, I know that. Okay? But I've not been burned ever by doing it that way. And I've actually done it the wrong way a couple times, which is why I'm so powerful on the other way.
I think that's really great. You've worked with the person, so you can gauge, like,
You have to
you're going
gauge.
to react to them.
And hopefully it doesn't backfire. Yeah. Yes.
How large have your companies been? I noticed in the past when I've had employees, I didn't care where they were or what they were doing, as you said, as long as the work got done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and still, I see large companies require, I've turned out, I mean, not that I'm looking for anything, because, you know, but I've been offered jobs, and they always say you have to be in-house, and that's the deal breaker for me. They have a perfect environment where they're like, I said, look, I understand you have to be a certain window when the meetings get done, certain things, you know, you have to have some face time, but autonomy to me is like the MasterCard commercial, it's priceless.
It's productivity,
I don't like
it's everything.
being controlled, I don't like being,
I don't know if it's
thumb on my head, so
I don't know if it's a company size issue. I think it's a company culture issue.
okay.
But I've worked in companies small and large. I mean, I've worked for, well, I can't say I was senior enough in IBM to say that I worked for IBM, but IBM is a very distributed culture, and they support people working wherever, and they measure you based on deliverables. But I worked for Documentum that was 3,000 people, and Lotus that was 6,000 people. And today we're 12 people, and we make it work. So I don't know if it's a company size thing. I think it is a mindset and how they want to approach building their team and their company, I think. Yes?
A quick comment on that from a smaller company where you can have the distribution become a problem. It become a problem if it doesn't become a problem if you have X and Y who work together, or one of them is distributed, because they see the other's performance.
Yeah.
Once you move a little further, let's say no one ever sees your sales guy, who's working really hard, and there's lots of leads with their sales cycle, blah, blah, blah. R&D means looking like,
Yeah, what's going on?
what the hell's that dude doing? He's being paid quite a bit, and I never see the guy here. Then you're like, well, how am I going to solve this problem? I'm going to brief them on Salesforce and give them all Salesforce logic. Well, that seems like, so you kind of end up as a CEO kind of handling this sort of issue where you are aware that around the coffee, there's a little grumbling about people in the other department who you never ever see, but who aren't delivering the bacon because you don't actually understand or have particularly. So
I think it's a tricky problem. I don't want to oversimplify any of this, right? Everybody heard the question, and I hope that got on video too. It's a good question. I mean, I think communication helps a lot here. I think FaceTime is important sometimes, like you said. There are times to check in, and a virtual relationship only works if there's a real relationship underlying it. We all know that also. So spending that time to build that trust that that sales guy that's remote is awesome, doing his job. I don't need to see him to have confidence in that individual. How do you get to that point, even if things go tough? Let me try and get through this, and then we're going to have plenty of time for questions at the end, if that's okay. All right? I'm going to skip ahead here. Foster a culture that embraces flexibility and thrives in good times and bad, as I said earlier. So there is no straight line. We know that. Abby and I had two great slides. Do you remember the slides? There was this, where was that road? That road in Kansas that went like this. Those are not startups. Lombard Street is startups, right? So you need to build a team that can take those left and right turns with you, right? And not go off the road, okay? So we talked about this in the Agile mindset, deferring decisions that can be deferred. So flexibility is about, I'm not going to lock in on that one right now. I don't need to make that decision. What's the level of freemium support or freemium offering that I'm going to create? I know there's a freemium and I know there's a premium. We're going to defer that one for a little bit until we learn more. Architecting for uncertainty, not just technically architecting, but architecting the company for uncertainty. Getting very crisp about what you don't know and what you do know. And then saying, we're just going to make sure that we don't build too much around where that uncertainty is. I talked about this a little bit earlier also. Reward people that take the ball and move it forward. We need to learn more about this before we can make the decision. Who can take that and go make it happen? Those are the kind of people you want on your team. They can kind of get some data, build something, make something happen that helps move the ball forward, not to the finish line, but closer to the finish line. There's a fair amount of debate around. Focus on what you must do well and outsource the rest. Outsource, not necessarily meaning send it to India or something like that, but there are things that we don't need to do. I don't really need to have a bookkeeper on my payroll in the early days. I have to have a bookkeeper, but that's not core to my success or failure. I would like a CFO to keep a look at my books and make sure we're not doing anything to run awry of the law or of the IRS, but I don't need to own that. Execute fast. How do you execute fast? I mean, you can run faster in place. That's one way to do it. Another is to just make sure you take smaller bites. So trying to figure out ways that I don't need to solve the whole problem, I'm going to solve a little piece of that problem and move that forward and get that execution and test that and know that that's working. But what I found, to make that work, you have to create the parking lot. You have to have a place to put the things you're not doing today. What often happens, this happens in product features, but it happens in companies broadly, if we have no way to put stuff on the side and find them later, everything gets crammed into this release and gets crammed into this month. And therefore it gets too late and you're late and you miss it and you build too much. So executing fast requires taking smaller bites and having a place to say, I'm not doing that now, I'm going to put that in the future, okay? These are just some of the things. And we're going to learn some more from the teams when we come up. What are you doing to embrace flexibility in your organization so that you can do Lombard Street? Melissa says, make every hire count in the beginning and feel pain before adding. So another important point here too is by outsourcing, sometimes you might realize I don't really want to do that. And if you have the employee on board and you said your job is to go do X and you realize that job doesn't need to be done anymore, well, that's painful. Versus, let's go experiment. Let's hire a contractor. Let's go see if it works. We don't know if it's going to work for the business or not. We're going to try it. You know, what kind of marketing person is the right kind of marketing person to hire? It depends on what our business model is. So you might hire someone who's a good utility player and have them do a bunch of things, or maybe you just outsource it and find someone to come try different things with you and then figure it out and then hire the right person. Diane says this, in the beginning you need utility players, people who will see a customer problem and fix a problem, make coffee, help with internal training, and get the mail. Later on, you need specialists. If we can hire more people like this that are just willing to get things done, that makes it a lot easier to remain flexible. Outsource with care also. Critical mass first, and flexibility and agility is key. Really underscoring everything here. Okay. Allow for Gen Y and Gen Z. How do you create an environment that attracts the younger generation to get that energy and fresh thinking in your company? Okay. And I'm not an expert in this by any means, so there was a great article in Inc. that I saw a couple months ago, and so I just kind of summarized that here. You know, creating a relaxed work environment. We tried to do that in E-Room in the video. It was a little cheeky, but the reality is places for chilling out, places for recreation, beer on tap, I kind of like it. Watch out for the laws. You know, we said 3-week vacation policy. A lot of companies have no vacation policy today. They say, get your work done. Take the time off you need to. That really does reinforce what we were talking about earlier of holding people accountable for the stuff they do, not FaceTime. Make the executive team accessible to employees. In this early stage, kind of executive team in the boardroom in that first slide, that's so counter to what we're trying to build here, right? A flat org chart, candidly kind of mentoring and teaming younger folks up with people that are a little bit more senior of them. Career pathing, helping people think through what they might want to do next, giving them lots of different choices. That, I think, really keeps the younger generation engaged. If they feel like they're still learning, they're still growing, you know, finding younger people that are willing to take direction too is not easy, but this will make sure that you do that. If I could do that with my kids, that'd be great. They don't listen to me anymore. Set up processes, but be flexible. Processes are important. It's not a dirty word. But you need to kind of say, this is the way we do things. Sometimes you need to just try things, as we've said. And if it doesn't work, be flexible, go in and make the change. I think the younger generation, you know, I think processes are good to keep people kind of in check a little bit. But let's be flexible. If it doesn't work for them and it doesn't work for the company as a whole, maybe we need to make a change. I won't talk a lot about Gen Z because we're not hiring many of them yet, or some of us, maybe we are. Anybody hiring teens? Not yet. It's going to be different when this social generation, this lack of sensitivity to privacy grows up. I'm going to be curious to see what that happens in the workforce. Maybe they'll change and they'll realize they err their ways, or maybe they'll teach us that they were right. I'm not sure yet. But there's also energy there. The broadcasting mentality of that generation, they've been called the age of the selfie. You know, how does that help or hurt your culture? I don't know. Maybe it can be really helpful depending on what you're trying to do. Okay? Hopefully they'll realize it's not all about them. It is about the company. You need to get them thinking it's about the collective win and it's about the company as a whole. Okay? Okay. Oh, Brian says, embrace Gen Y. Don't fight them. If you make Gen Ys work in a Gen X culture, they won't be happy. But if you build a Gen Y culture, which I think HubSpot is, they'll be hyper productive. We need to get over ourselves and conform to them. That may be a little strong, not the other way around. Maybe we can, maybe he is embracing his youth and he wants to remain young, perhaps, but it will keep us all young. That's why I like to do what I do here in the iLab, actually, is because it keeps me young. It keeps me learning. I get stuff as much coming back as I do in mentoring. So that's kind of that feels a little bit formulaic to me. That feels a little bit like, here's a set of things you should do. What you need to do is take that and interpret that for your own particular situation, your own particular company. And there's a set of other questions that I would have you ask of yourself, and we're going to ask some of the folks here that come on the stage to join me a little bit. How do you bring the unique requirements of your business into how do you build your startup team? Because there is no one answer. And every company, depending on biz model and technology and location and markets and all that, is going to have a slightly different nuanced approach to my imperatives that I just shared with you, okay? How important is domain experience and skills in what you're doing and age? How important is it that you be distributed? Which markets are you going after? Are you building a physical product? Are you delivering something that gets outsourced? Are you doing a software product? Are you doing something that's not technology at all? How are you distributing? That probably has the biggest impact in terms of the type of team that you want to build. You know, am I building something that's distributed in the cloud way over the wire or over the app store? Or do I have field-based salespeople that need to call on enterprise customers? Very different. And likely we're all in the kind of a capital efficient, scarcity of capital world today. Anybody raising their hands doing kind of $10, $15 million rounds right now? No? There are some. Oh, good. We got one in the back. Yes? Hopefully? We'll see. Depending on how much capital you're trying to raise and who you're raising it from, you might build your team and your company differently. Because if you're trying to prove something smaller, I need to prove I can get a prototype in the market that's valuable to customers and that they'll tell other customers about it. If I can prove that, then I can go raise money and I can go raise $1 million on that. Or it's a different kind of thing. I need to do 2 years worth of development before I can even put it in the marketplace, and I need to have a whole big organization behind it to make sure that we're testing it properly. Go raise $10 or $15 million if you're doing that. Different businesses, different needs, different team needs there, okay? So I'm not going to go through this in great detail because this has to really be applied to your unique specific situation, okay? I also realized late last night that this pitch is probably targeted a little bit more to teams that are a few people looking to kind of ramp up a little bit. It may not be as appropriate to kind of the founder, the sole founder who's kind of sweating away themselves, trying to kind of beg, borrow, and steal anywhere they can. And I said, oh, did I miss the mark here? And I went back and thought, what would I do differently if I were a sole founder or a sole individual in a team trying to build my team at this point? And the reality is, I think that the framework still works. You still need to get someone. Let's imagine you're looking for a co-founder. You want to find someone who has the same shared enthusiasm for the vision and passion for what you're trying to achieve. Same thing. That first hire has to be somebody that shares that passion with you, not somebody that's just coming on board to kind of build something or execute something. They need to be complementary to you. Caution hiring the roommate, hiring the friend, hiring the spouse that looks like you, acts like you, spends all their time with you. Find somebody that complements you, that challenges you, that from a skills and preferences, strengths and weakness perspective, helps complete that whole, helps add to that idea of a whole brain, okay? Have the conversation about what are you trying to do with this? How do we want to grow it? Is growth and success a billion-dollar company where we've raised $100 million in venture capital, or is growth and success $1 million from angels, we get profitable, we grow a great business, profitable, throws off cash? Have that conversation. You will find getting into building the company very different things you're trying to achieve depending on your growth objectives. Yes, sorry.
So you were talking about the sole founder. That's kind of the position I'm in right
now.
Trying to figure out how to find that person, but in the meantime, I need to also just have a sounding board, somebody to iterate with, like even if without figuring out, even if you haven't found that person.
Let me do this. Let me get through the pitch. I'm almost done. Okay. I'm going to come back to that because I knew it's going to come up. How do I find that person that's my complement? What do I do in the interim is the question. We'll come back to that, I promise. You need to partner with somebody that you can trust with your children. This is hard. You need to not worry about, are they doing something that's counter to you and where you're going? Okay? So trust, as we said earlier in building your team, trust with a co-founder is all the more important. Somebody who can disagree respectfully, not someone who just says yes, or that's someone that goes ballistic on you. Is in it, committed, good times and bad, right? Really wants to join and say, I'm going to go through the hard times because there will be hard times. And I think even of yourself you'd ask this, willing to step aside if needed. You get to a point where the growth has exceeded the individual, or the company needs something else for some reason. We're doing this for the collective win and for the success of the company, not the success of the individual. Okay? So I think when you're looking to co-founders, this is an interesting checklist, probably not complete, but an interesting set of questions to ask yourself. Is this the right person? Because it's a long-term commitment. Not as long as a marriage, but it feels a lot like a marriage. It's a couple of years at least, and maybe it could be 10 years. Okay? I will be candid with you. I haven't been this thoughtful about co-founders. You know, you maybe do it intuitively, but I'm going to ask these questions a lot more of myself as I look to kind of have people join me, okay? This also brings up a question, I'm not going to spend any time on this, on founder pie issues, ownership, equity, whole set of questions around that. We're not going to spend any time on that today. That was a pitch that I did a while ago called Dividing the Founder Pie. I do it occasionally here in the iLab. We'll probably do it again some other time. And it talks about how to have that conversation with a co-founder around ownership, okay? Okay, take a breath. That was a little longer than I thought, I apologize. But we're scheduled to go to 4. I hope that's not too long for folks, but now we want to get to the interactive part. And we have 3 teams that have volunteered to kind of join me for a discussion about taking this set of imperatives and a framework we put forth, and let's have a conversation about it, okay? So let's start with Sarah, is that okay?
Awesome.
We're going to
Awesome. Where do I go?
come up here, set up some chairs. You took notes, good, okay. Well, while you're doing that, Abby, let me just ask Sarah to give 30 seconds on what the company's about and your vision for the company.
Awesome. Do I have a...
Here, is this on?
Sorry. Here.
Is that on, Abby? I don't know where the switch is.
All right, cool. So my company is Hupik. We're basically creating a movement. We changed everything as of a week ago. So we're creating a movement for people who have food allergies to be able to eat outside of their home. It started as a device. It's now being sort of transformed into sort of auto check-in app when you walk into restaurants, starting as that, then going into training with a restaurant chef, and maybe getting to a device eventually. But essentially what we are doing is making it so that if you have a food allergy, you can eat outside of your home, whether that be in your town or in Paris or in India or wherever you're going, and not be afraid of having that meal.
So this is, the restaurant would be running some of your software then?
Yep.
And I would check in some way,
Yep.
so they're now aware of what my allergies are.
Correct.
Okay, I got it. So have you raised money yet?
We have not raised money yet.
Okay.
We got some money from winning the Harvard Innovation Challenge, Harvard College Innovation Challenge in the commercial category. We got $10,000 from that. They're giving us another $5,000 at the end. They're holding out on us. But that's how much we've made so far.
So on that 10 or 15,000, the hope is you prove something so you can go raise more capital, right?
Theoretically, yes.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
So what would you like to prove on this first round of capital? What are you trying to get done?
We're trying to prove that we can actually offer something valuable and that will ideally actually allay the fear.
For the consumer or for the restaurant?
For both, but in particular, the consumer. My father and my sister both have seafood allergies, and it's awful, and they've had so many reactions at this point that I can't even count how many times they've had one. And get to the point where they have a safe encounter in a restaurant, and my father doesn't have a panic attack when he walks by Legal Seafoods. The door swings open, and he smells lobster.
So I found the passion for you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's now out there.
Yep.
So describe the current team.
It's me right now.
Right now.
Yep.
Any independent people working with you or just you?
So it's a complicated story. So I had a very difficult conversation this past week with who was my co-founder. We're still struggling to sort of figure out what position he holds. But we know he's not a co-founder because he's not out of school yet. He just can't prioritize this company. He literally marks off every single box that you mentioned in this presentation
I would trust him with my kids. He gets along great with my boyfriend. Like, it is just great. You know, we like bro around.
Was that on the chart? I missed that one.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know,
Yeah.
I have a long distance boyfriend, so that's important to have that
okay,
trust.
yeah.
And you know, he's a great individual. He's just thinks about things in completely different ways than I do, and it's caused us to go great for a while.
Okay. So let's talk about, you set a milestone of what you want to achieve.
Yep.
I imagine this is get some software out there then that can do this, or is this just test in the marketplace, the concept?
Test the marketplace right now.
So test and get validation of what the software might need to do.
Correct.
Okay, so and do this on a number of restaurants?
Yes.
Probably, and a number of consumers.
Different sorts of restaurants. So we want to go to places like Clover that are really into experimenting. We want to go to some place as boring as Burger King. We want to go to the Legal Seafoods to see what the luxury looks like. We want to know what it looks like at a luxury resort, maybe. Maybe what it looks like at Disney. They're also super into allergies. So just kind of being able to find where our niche might be.
Okay. So with that, you need a set of people or skills around you to help you execute that?
That's
do you think?
correct.
Or is that all on your shoulders?
At this point, it is all on my shoulders.
Well, let's talk through first kind of what talent do you, ideally, if you put maybe capital aside a second, if you could attract someone around the team that could help you,
Yep.
what kind of talent would you try to attract?
I found that someone who thinks linearly works really well for me. I tend to be one of those creatives that has a cajillion ideas.
Yep.
And
Somebody
you know,
helps you
stutters.
focus it
I'm
down.
thinking so fast and have so many things to think about. So someone who thinks in a more linear way.
Is this someone also, so the in-market testing, is that something this person would do, you would do, both of you together? Both together.
I think it's something that it would be key to sort of how I'd want to run a company to have them experience it with me.
In terms of the requirements for the app and product requirements and the like, that's written down in your head, exists somewhere, or that person needs to bring it on also? You're looking for someone with product or technical skills?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I would look to someone who has some experience doing some mobile development at this point to understand what consumers look for, or what it should look like, or what it should feel like, or what people respond to. Is gamification something that we should use? Is it not? How do you work with inside this new sort of mobile app environment?
Okay. Any other things you think you need in terms of skills to bring into the company at this stage?
At this stage, I would love to have someone who's a veteran in the restaurant field to understand what sort of systems they're using now electronically. Maybe we would be able to incorporate into that. Maybe there's something that is just this huge barrier and we would never be able to overcome, and so we need to find another way around that. That would be awesome. Maybe even a chef.
Let me challenge you there a little bit, because finding that person that also is comfortable in startups and technology and creating a new market, very difficult person to hire. And I'm not telling you can't, but maybe think about that person as an advisor, an independent, or someone part-time that helps. Because they would bring in the restaurant experience, but not slow you down from the other things that you might need to do. And maybe you get lucky and you find that person that can do both.
Right.
This is a time period, I'm going to jump over focus a little bit right now, just also given time. You need to learn a lot in this phase, right? What are some of the key questions you think you need to answer in this phase?
One of the biggest questions is what creates peace of mind? How do you quantify that? How do you express that you can deliver that?
Yeah.
And how you even define that to begin with in order to make a product that allows for that to happen.
So this is a phase where flexibility is pretty key. It's a little easier because it's just you. And clearly the objective is about learning and getting back from the marketplace. This is right, that isn't right. So it's a little bit easier to handle kind of creating that learning organization at this point. What else is needed, do you think, in terms of learnings in the marketplace? What else do you need to learn?
There's so many things. I mean, I think a lot of this goes back to what do we defer for now and what is the most important thing right now. I'm going to read this as a question of what are one of those more important things at the front of my mind that I want to answer now. I would definitely say who is going to pay for it, and in that sense, who are we creating the most value for, and who are we killing the most pain for? Is it actually the restaurants in the end, because they might want to be able to know that they're not going to have a reaction in the restaurant, or this can act as some sort of liability buffer, and that's a huge painkiller for them. Or maybe it increases their liability.
Or increases their liability.
Or there's so many different things, and maybe we're just a way to access, food allergic people, and we do advertisements in our app for, I don't know, like clinical trials or something.
So one of the things I know as an investor, selling to restaurants is really tough. There's only one success we can point to recently, and it took them a long time, OpenTable. So a lot of investors are going to be averse to something that requires people calling on restaurants to get something sold.
Right.
So I suspect answering that question of distribution and how are you going to get consumers and how you're going to get restaurants in this early phase is going to be pretty important also. You need to figure that out once you figure out what the solution is. So I would add, maybe not to kind of put words in your mouth there, but learning kind of how are you going to distribute it and how are you going to get customers and restaurants to kind of embrace it is something you probably want to try and embrace in this phase as well. Question back there?
I was thinking about cafeterias, so maybe there's an alternative market that you could start in with, like a company like Sodexo provides food for universities or hospitals.
It goes back to who pays then also, because if there was a way that a partner could distribute for you, if it were free, that's a lot easier. They could get generate awareness for you, and you figure out some way of freemium or someone else pays for it potentially. Who benefits most? Yes.
It could also be, I don't know if this is a good way to profitability, but it could also be like a members type of, like information sharing. I have a friend who just found out his baby daughter is allergic, has a nut allergy, and he doesn't know how to leave the house with her, and he's desperate for guidance. He won't go anywhere until he's been assured that nothing has nuts, and I just think like maybe if you start like having a community of people that share information, and maybe it's a membership community.
I like that a lot, yeah.
That way you don't have to sell anything to a big user to roll out just yet, but there's information sharing.
So that brings up then another skill that you need to attract to the company as someone who has community building experience, if that's not you, Sarah. Right? How do you get that into the company early and see if you could build? I love business models that start with something that's off on the side and a little bit easier to build that then helps facilitate what you're trying to achieve longer term. HubSpot did a brilliant job of that in the early days. Can we go back to your co-founder a little bit and poke on that? Because I think there might be some team learning there and maybe audience learning as well, kind of embracing difficult decisions. You took that head on. What brought it to a head, if I can ask?
I sat down with one of my mentors, and he said, no excuses. And I said, well, but, and he just kept saying no excuses. And I ended up sitting with him for like 2.5 hours talking about what my value prop was and what it means to be the leader of an idea and how you are the only person to advocate it. And at the end, he just said, no excuses. And I mean, this is a guy that's worked with, not only has domain expertise, but has also had a very successful company. And it just rang so true for me that I just didn't have excuses.
But
and although it was a
just
personally difficult decision.
He wasn't committed enough. Was that the only issue, or were there other issues there?
I mean, there's also the thing that we're a young team, and there's not necessarily domain expertise. But as you said, and as has been proven over the year, that was not a factor that really affected us super negatively. We actually were able to do quite well for ourselves, considering we didn't have a whole lot of experience. Mm-hmm. But in the end, we weren't his priority. I understood that. As a human being, I understood that. And, we're still friends. We still talk. We're still, everything. And there's a possibility that, when we could be a priority for him, that would be a nice person to hire. But right now, the idea can't do that. It's just not compatible with growth.
Good for you for doing that.
It was really hard.
Any other questions for Sarah in the audience? Anything else you want to touch on framework we put forth that was helpful to you, that really kind of helped you think a little bit?
Oh, like everything.
Everything.
Pretty much everything. But the only thing I would say is no excuses.
I like no excuse. I'm going to add that to the pitch if I can. Great, Sarah. Thank you so much. Appreciate you taking the time to come up. Phil, you ready?
Yep.
Come join us.
Thanks.
I know a little bit less about life guides, so why don't you, again, start from the beginning. Tell us a little bit more about kind of your business and your vision for the business.
Sure. So the vision for Life Guides is to create a curated repository of knowledge around life events. So if you think about buying your first home, maybe dealing with a health event like diabetes, another chronic illness, or something like going to graduate school. If you had a couple of friends who had kind of gone before you and done it, you could sit them down for coffee, learn about their story, save yourself some time, money, and stress. But chances are you don't have those friends. And so what we do is we take a life event, we find 3 to 5 people who have been there, done that. We have them spend 40 minutes in front of a webcam, record basically their story and very specific parts of their story, and we put it in free guides for anybody to access on the internet.
So you do an editing job of that and really try and tell a story of how you might deal with childhood illness or something like that.
Yeah, so the curation comes in choosing the right people as well as choosing the right questions.
And this is a web experience then for people and building a community around these life events, do you think also? Or is it more just a solo thing? I go, I watch a video, and I'm done, I move on.
Yeah, so we'd love to create a community as well. We don't have the critical mass at this point, but basically most users that we've talked to have asked for, could I be in a group of 5 or 10 people, private bulletin board that are going through the same life event, share stories, share questions, things like that.
I'll ask the same question. You've raised capital yet?
We've got $5,000 from the HBS Rock Accelerator.
Awesome. Have you spent it?
We've spent $700 of it thus far.
So what do you want to achieve with that $5,000? What do you want to prove?
Yeah, so we have a site up. We've got about 15 guides. Our traffic keeps growing. I think what we really need to prove is that we can scalably acquire high-quality content from interesting people across a broad array of knowledge spaces and translate that into users. And so basically now we have an online guide creation platform where somebody can go on and create a guide in 90 minutes. We basically need to find people that actually are going to go on and do that and get value out of it.
So that would be for a single kind of person giving a video kind of overview, or they would pull together multiple videos and put together a guide?
So basically it's 25 minutes to define the guide. What do you want to cover? What are the chapters? What are the subtopics? And then about 40 minutes per contributor to go on and add content. So if you wanted, so it's 25 plus n times the number of, or 40 times the number of people contributing.
And my assumption is after this $5,000, you're going to be out looking to raise money to kind of fund the company at that point, or you think there are other sources of capital that you need to get a little bit further before you do that?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
So we've had a couple of people that I've worked with in the past and friends of mine who have offered to invest in the company, and I think it's really, how do I feel about this going forward? And would I put my own money into this? And that's kind of how we're going to judge whether or not to raise capital.
Being skeptical yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
Exactly.
Great. I like that as well. I think keeping that healthy skepticism about your own startup and making sure this is worthy of your time, because you could be doing other things, is really important. So tell me about the team today.
Yeah, so the team, I'm the founder. I used to work in venture capital. I'm a self-taught programmer, went to HBS. And then we've got 4 lovely interns. 2 of them are right here. I don't see the other 2. So 2 are developers. One's doing a CS undergrad, one's doing a master's in CS. The other, so these guys have been teaching themselves a lot of code. Actually, Alyssa redesigned our whole homepage, which looks nice. You should check it out.
Cool.
Yeah, that's kind of the team.
So let's go back to kind of what do you think is missing on the team in terms of skills, based on what we need to get proven, which is get the product out and get some proof that kind of you can attract content and you can attract people to view that content. What's missing on the team, do you think?
Yeah, so I think we need, well, first of all, 4 of the 5 of us are going back to college in August, and so that's a lot of manpower generally.
Yeah.
I think that it would be great to have a product person. So I can code. I don't have a great sense of design. I probably shouldn't be spending my time coding. I probably have a comparative advantage in other things.
Yes.
So that's a skill that we're missing. That would be a great co-founder. Marketing. So we're building a brand. We're building a community. We're trying to get out there and get interesting people excited about using our platform. Somebody who's just like an evangelist. That would be huge.
These are co-founder types, do you think, or do you think these are employees that you hire after you've raised some capital?
So the plan is basically, I have the skills to execute, so let's execute and raise capital because I know I can do that. And then in the meantime, I'm going to hackathons. When I'm working, I'm trying to network as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would be wonderful to find somebody who would be a great co-founder, but I also realize that it's almost impossible to find somebody that fits the mold. And so I'm not banking on that. I guess I'm hedging my bets.
Let me go back to, I didn't quite get out of you, what's the passion for this space? Why are you doing this?
So it goes back to when I was in college. I interned at a Wall Street investment bank. I didn't have a great time. I wrote myself a note in the middle of the summer. I was like, hey, Phil, here's why you wouldn't want to do this for your life. In September, it was 2007. I had a lovely job offer from said investment bank and was feeling the pressure. I actually remember meeting with the CEO and was feeling the pressure. And I almost signed that offer, but I literally found this note on my desk, and I'd completely forgotten everything that I'd written in that note. And so last year I was at HBS, and the pressure is even higher when you have debt and you have kids, and you're going to get flown to Hawaii for a weekend or whatever and get an extra signing bonus if you sign. And so I basically just made this little structured reflection tool, got a lot of good feedback, and a lot of people were like, hey, this actually changed my career trajectory, this 10-minute exercise. And so I said, gee whiz, there's all these hacks that people have figured out about life events. Here's one, but there's thousands. And if you had that information, you'd save yourself an incredible amount of time, money, and stress. And so that was how Life Guides was born.
So finding somebody that shares that vision with you, that passion, that it's not just a product co-founder. I often hear that I'm looking for a CTO or product co-founder. There are a million out there, and they're not going to join you.
Right.
Right? The one that's going to join you is someone who cares about that, maybe had a life event like that.
Yeah.
So how do you find that person? Not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but networking with a more focused view towards what you're looking for. Like, let me meet people that have been through this before, that have made changes in their career, or had some other life experience that required a change, death of a parent, health issue, whatever it might be. Just in the interest of time here a little bit, what do you hope to learn in kind of this first phase, in the $5,000, that helps you decide whether you're going to do this going forward or not?
I think we need to figure out what the value prop is to the mentors creating guides.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love it if there were just pockets of people that wanted to pay it forward and give back. And I think there are a lot of people out there like that. It's hard to find them in a scalable way. And so do we become more of like a self-promotion platform? I really hope not. But basically, we need to figure out how do we scalably acquire high-quality content. We've actually also experimented with some more like user-generated type of things with like sharing reflections and things like that.
Getting it to be high quality and trusted seems to me to be a high bar.
Yeah,
and you're going to have to hit that bar for me as a consumer to come in and say, I'm going to take your advice.
Right.
So these are people that either have reputational authority or experience in it or do it as a living or something. It's not just you made a decision about joining investment banking or not and I did a video. Right?
Yeah.
I might not trust your input as much as somebody that's done it for a career or something like that, right? So I think that's a key thing to push on, is learning about what does it take to attract high quality content there.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely part of it. And I guess something that we've struggled with a little bit, I think we found the solution is, like, is it the top, percentage point somebody that wrote a book about this, or is it top 5% somebody who worked at Goldman Sachs and then worked at Bain Capital and they're going to do a guide on going to private equity? And it happens that they're in the top 5%, and we've kind of figured out that like that's pretty good, especially if you find somebody with charisma who wants to give back for the right reasons.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think getting answers to those questions will be interesting to see what does it take to motivate people. I think that's right.
Yeah.
sounds like there's still a lot to figure out here, though. So flexibility is pretty key in terms of, we talked about that. I'm curious how you found the interns to join you. Where did they come from? And what do they look like in terms of skills that they bring to the company?
Yeah, sure. So I found them all through college job boards, mostly BU and then Northeastern. The skills that they bring, so 2 of them are very technical, and they've just basically spent the entire summer coding.
Yeah.
2 of them are more generalists, and they've been doing a lot of marketing, blog post writing, things like that, as well as dipping their toes into things that honestly they have a comparative advantage in, which is design, making things look right, talking to users, things like that.
Very cool. I suspect the organization feels a little bit like, Phil, these are things that need to get done, go get this stuff done. Or is it more collaborative? Is it more kind of people trying different things and learning as an organization yet? Or does the learning come to you and that translates back to, we're doing X, Y, and Z? How would you describe it?
I think it especially started off as the former.
Yep.
And then it's evolved a little bit. So every day we have a morning check-in where people,
Great.
I'm asking them, hey, what are you working on today? I'm not saying, hey, this is what you're doing. We have a weekly strategy meeting where we review metrics and transparency.
Great.
We also learn about something. Last week we learned about venture capital. And that's a space where anybody can say, like, hey, I don't understand why we're focusing on this, or why am I working on that? We also have weekly one-on-ones where I'll sit down with somebody, and it's my explicit goal not to talk in that meeting. And it's just for them to say, like, here's what I think we should be doing at Life Guides. Here's what my experience has been like. Here's my feedback for you as a manager.
So last question. So come August, everybody goes back to school.
Yeah.
You probably won't have spent all the money by then.
I don't think so. Our burn is like $100 a month.
Yeah.
So.
So question is kind of what happens through the next year?
Yeah.
How do you keep the ball moving forward when people are taking classes and they've got other commitments? Do they remain engaged with the company? Do they go away? Do you hire other people? What are you thinking about for the fall?
It's unclear.
Yeah.
So my guess is that 1 or 2 of them will want to continue working on Life Guides in the school year. We'll probably end up trying to hire some other help. We're on a trajectory right now where it's not inconceivable that we'd be able to that I would feel good enough to raise money in the fall. And so, if we raise $300,000 or $500,000 or whatever it is, then we could hire somebody to fill some of these roles. So it's a little bit unclear, but I think their trajectory is such that I feel confident that we'll be able to attract other talented people if we need to.
And it sounds like the 2 big areas for me are around product, as you talked about, and being able to get the high quality content. Somebody can go out and really kind of find that content and get it produced and get it on the platform.
Right.
And then there's a third piece, which is getting users to engage with it. But I think that's probably something you could handle on your own. Well, good luck to you. Hopefully today was helpful to you. Any questions for Phil here? Yes, Sarah.
Have you looked at Quora as sort of a parallel of how to recruit good people who have legitimate reasons to be answering questions to answer those questions?
Yeah, we've looked a lot at Quora and also Stack Overflow, which is like this developer Q&A site. And I think the way both of those started was Stack Overflow is run by this guy, Joel Spolsky, who just kind of like knew a lot of really high quality developers, and they kind of use this as their personal message board. Got a lot of good content. And I think the Quora guys, they're ex-Facebook. And if you remember at the beginning of that website, it was all tech stuff. Like that's all there was. And I think they just asked like their closest 300 friends to write a bunch of stuff. And that's kind of what we're doing too. So we have a lot of career and financial services related content in the pipeline and on the site because of my network, and hopefully that's an interesting base to go and bridge to other stuff. But yeah.
2 more questions I now have. Interesting if this can be a marketing platform for some of these experts. Fine line of crossing the line over from kind of giving guidance and then selling somebody something. Right. But that's an interesting way to kind of promote. I mean, these radio TV shows that are on Sunday morning, the financial guidance shows that are content helpful, but they're recruiting hard for you. That's pretty clear.
Yeah.
And then just last, for the recruiting the interns, younger than you, right, or about the same?
No, they're
No,
all
some no.
they're all like 20. I'm
20
28,
something.
So
So any learnings from managing somebody in their 20? Well, you're 30?
28.
28.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're close enough to it, you know. But any learnings in terms of motivating a young team and interns and have their own ideas of what they want to accomplish this summer?
So I think, you know, two big things was just like being very genuine about trying to make this an awesome summer for them. So one of the reasons I wanted to have summer interns is that I had a summer internship at a startup when I was a sophomore in college, and it truly changed the trajectory of how I thought about my career. And I just wanted to be a great mentor, and I think that that is payment. And then I also think skills development. So the people that wanted to learn programming this summer are learning programming. You know, I always, whenever I am prioritizing work, and maybe this is to the detriment of the progress that we're making, I always think, is this going to be like mindless, terrible, soul-crushing work? And if so, how can I break it up?
Great.
And how can I make it interesting? And hopefully we don't have too much of that. I see
How's,
these guys
Phil
smiling.
how's Phil done? Great? Good summer?
My soul's intact.
Her soul's intact, okay. But yeah, I think just being genuine about wanting to make it an awesome summer, because that's what it's about. It's about getting good experience.
Kudos to you for doing it. I think
Yeah.
doing that early and doing that often is awesome. It's giving back, and it's probably making you better, and it's challenging what you're thinking about
Without
your
a
business.
doubt.
Without
Yeah,
a doubt.
without a doubt.
Just to riff off on that question, how did you attract them in terms of compensation or things like that? Because it's tough to attract technical interns, especially.
It is challenging. I think I don't really have a technical background. I taught myself how to program. But being able to relate to people with a technical background was really important, and showing that in an interview. And I also think just like articulating like, what are you going to get out of this summer? One of our guys really wants to work at a big tech company. And I've got a bunch of friends who work at big tech companies, and I'm more than happy to help them get there. But yeah, I think you kind of have to sell people on a dream and experience, because you can't sell them on compensation unless you raise more than $5,000. So yeah, just like sharing your knowledge. Like every week we have this lunch and learn thing. Like every week we share the metrics. Like everybody's part of the team. You know, it's not like me doling out tasks. Like I think it's all these little things that make it fun to work, and you have to communicate that in the interview and just be genuine about it. Yeah.
Great. Phil, thank you. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, the Six Foods team.
So I think I'm
You're
gonna
gonna
call
do-
them out on certain things.
Okay.
Instead of having 6 of us up here.
And you're Taylor.
I'm Rose.
You're Rose.
Yes.
Who's Taylor?
Taylor's right there.
That's
He's actually
Taylor.
an intern. So I want
How
to
did
call
Taylor?
him
Oh, you replied to my email, Taylor. I didn't even check this.
And then, yeah, just use the mic so that we get it on.
Oh, you're going to pass. Yes. How are you doing?
No, well, I'm not clear who's in the last 3 columns.
Oh, okay. That's all right.
So maybe just let me know if you want something in those 3.
We might just have to kind of translate it later, but that's okay. Just capturing bullets like you're doing is great, so we can at least kind of, there were some good learnings that have come from this so far. All right, Rose. So I know what you do, but tell everybody here kind of what the company's about today and what your vision is for the company.
So we are Six Foods, and at Six Foods, we believe that 6 legs are better than 4, and we are introducing insects to the Western world as a sustainable food. And currently today, we are launching our first product, our Chirp chips. They are tortilla chips made with cricket flour, and they're 3 times the protein, half the fat of your leading potato chips. They're non-GMO and gluten-free. So we're really excited about that. And I'm here with my co-founder. We have a co-founder in New York, and then our 3 interns for the summer.
So before we go any further, how many folks are interested in trying the product? Wow, that's a good data set. If that's representative of the market, you'll do okay. Let's
I
see.
wish. We'll see.
We'll see. So have you raised money?
We did a Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah.
And we raised about $70,000 from there.
Great.
And we also have some money from business competitions. But we haven't gone the VC or angel round.
Not yet. And what needs to get accomplished on that capital that allows you to kind of both commit to the next phase and know that you're going to And what are you going to do? You raise more money in the next phase, I imagine, right?
Right. What we're looking at now is it's about being skeptical, like you said. Everything we've done up to this point has been testing our assumptions. I mean, we literally started out cooking up insects, like whole, because we're like, you know what? We're going to test this assumption that people aren't going to eat this. We were right.
Did you capture the insects yourself?
No, we ordered them from insect farmers.
I don't know much about this, but okay.
We can talk more
All
later.
right.
But yeah, so every step of the way we've been testing, like what product should we bring out? How should we bring it out? What is the messaging we're going to tell? For the first 4 months, all we did was pitch. We pitched at like all these different competitions until we got it right and started winning because we wanted to get tight on our messaging.
This was messaging to investors, not messaging to consumers. Or
But
both.
it was both
It was
because
both.
some of them were crowdsourced competitions, so
Okay.
people would
For
vote.
Kickstarter, you had to be messaging to consumers.
Exactly. And we were very successful. Our goal was 30,000. We raised that in 3 days. So we did pretty well. So in terms of...
So there was something iterative and learning in there. Can you summarize what you think that was that kind of caused you to kind of figure out what worked and what didn't work? How did you approach it?
I mean, it's all about design thinking, right? That's the buzzword, but it's what we're doing this day is we have hypotheses or, we talk to people and then we go out and test and we ask like every single person we come across. This is what I do. Like, this is all I talk about, bugs. And that's how you really like start figuring out like what product should we bring. Like, we narrowed it down to like cookies and chips. Every person we encountered within like a month, we literally asked them cookies or chips. So that was like so many people, so many data sets, and realizing, and using that to guide our
Cookies
decisions.
didn't win.
No.
No.
Yeah, chips won.
Okay.
It's still a tough one. I mean, it was close.
Okay.
So we had to pick one at the end and run with it.
And crickets were always the choice or other bugs?
Crickets are the bugs of choice. There are more constraints there, based on the supply chain and like what health benefits of the crickets compared to other insects.
Are there FDA laws that you need to be careful of here?
Yeah, so actually the FDA does not regulate this market.
Okay.
They're aware of it. Well, so I wouldn't look at it like that. So the food market generally is not very they don't have strict laws like they do in drugs, right? And so what they do is they actually treat insects like they do any other meat. And so we actually get the microbial testing, the same testing that you would for any other meat out there. And so it's totally safe. There's really high standards for meat, and so it's never caused any issues. We're not the only company producing cricket products that are on the market, so everyone's only getting better, not worse.
Okay.
But yeah, in terms of, I think, how to get to the next stage, it's about testing our actual product in test stores. Having that data, going to investors and saying, look at our velocity, look at the turn rate of our product. This is why we're going to sell well. And we've been getting a ton of media, and that's been really helping us too, is seeing how other people are consuming our idea and how they're responding to it. And it's been a really thrilling experience. Today we were actually featured in Business Insider as one of the top 10 companies that are going to change food in the future. And it was like, what?
So in terms of learning that you need to have, it sounds at the core of this is consumer behavior, right? I think that's probably the biggest question any investor is going to have is, can you influence can you change consumer behavior here in the West? What other questions do you think you need to answer? Or is it just really that one? If you could prove that, if you could prove people that try it, some percentage will repeat.
Right.
Maybe that's enough. Because I know you can create it. I'm not worried that you can't manufacture it. I'm assuming you can make it taste good, right? I'm assuming you can distribute it.
Yes. All these models are in place.
They're all in place. You can make money doing it. I thought the prices seemed a little high on the website. Is that?
That's only for right now. As we go, I think they're going to decrease for sure.
Okay. So what else do you think you need to then test and learn in this phase?
Well, I think, so we are treating ourselves like any other food product in the sense that any new product that comes to market, you're going to have to test on store shelves that's competing against everything else on the market, right? That's the big challenge. I don't actually think that the cricket aspect is, because what we're making is a chip. It's a chip, guys. You eat chips. And so it's about making our packaging stand out. When you walk by and there's all these food should taste good, or Cape Cod chips. You recognize ours and you're like, oh, why is there something called chirps, sitting there? Like, I'm kind of interested in this, or I've seen it before. So I think, one, it's about just standing out as like a food company first, regardless of, crickets. It's like honestly, it's like a superfood. It's like, oh, we put whey in our chips, or we put something else in our chips. It just comes down to, it's another ingredient, but it's like, how do we stand out as a food company, period? And I think that's the data that we need to collect, is when we're on these store shelves and we're moving product at a certain velocity, like the cricket part, that's what makes it exciting.
So two things that come to mind as an investor. One is, how big could this be? And that's where getting some more data to tell me, is this a nice niche business that you distribute online, or is this on store shelves and Stop and Shop?
Right.
Is one, and then one of defensibility. Because if you break your back proving that this market exists and getting there, then who's to say that now you've changed consumer behavior, the big guys can come in and play and roll right over you.
Right.
So how do you think about both of those? And do you think you have to address those two questions in the beginning?
Definitely. I mean, these are things that we think about every day. People have asked us from the beginning, like, well, what happens if Frito-Lay comes in and it's like, okay, we're going to develop, the next cricket chip. And it is possible, but generally what these big companies do is they buy companies like ours. It's actually a great exit strategy for us. And then the first question was,
how big can it be?
How big can it be? So we're looking at ourselves like another food company, right? It could be, so Food Should Taste Good, for example, was bought by General Mills recently for $100 million. This is a really scalable model. These distribution channels in retail, once you get with a really good distributor, you could be in a lot of stores as long as you're moving product. So it could be really large, and it's a very tried and true method. Have product, people buy it, repeat. As long as we can get people interested in what we're doing, the food tastes good, and people believe in our vision. I think it's all about this vision that we have. We're a chip, but what do we stand for? We stand for sustainability. We're standing for this future. And the more you support us, the more capable we are of, having these really great supply chains in cities where we're raising crickets in urban settings versus taking up agricultural land, where a lot of the water and arable land could be used for other things.
Okay, so let's turn to team a little bit. Introduce your team and tell me how you decide who does what.
Yes. So we have your presentation was really great, because it really touches upon a lot of things that we talk about. So the way that we started is Laura, here, my co-founder, she and I were college roommates, but we were put together by Harvard. We're the most opposite individuals you could put together. We took Myers-Briggs and realized that we were on the opposite side of the spectrum. And she was the one who came up with this crazy idea in the first place. She is off and on vegetarian and discovered eating insects abroad and read about it, sent it to me, and I had just eaten a scorpion abroad, and then we came together and we're like, oh my God, let's do this. And then we brought in our third co-founder, who has a more creative background. She's a designer, and that was how it started. She's a social entrepreneur. My background is in corporate business, and my co-founder is more creative in that sense. And so we have three very different perspectives, which makes for, a lot of arguments. We actually, like you said, we make better decisions because we say, if all three of us can agree on something, it's a good idea, because we're coming from very different perspectives. And then we also brought on 3 interns with us this summer, and this is our first time having interns. And I just want to talk about interns for a little bit in terms of when we first got into it, a lot of people were like, interns are more work than they're worth, you shouldn't do this. And I've worked in a lot of larger corporations, and it really comes down to, I think, the hiring process. So we actually had about 30 people apply for the position. Some of us, also some of them found us through blogs. And we had a very rigorous hiring process where I asked really hard questions. Theoretically, if I were giving you $5,000 for the summer and you had your goal is to reach a certain demographic, what would you do? Walk me through your thought process. It's very open-ended, but I'm really looking at what are you thinking? How are you thinking? And we dwindled it down to 3 people who were are like absolute superstars. So Taylor here is from Tufts. Farhat is from St. Olaf. And then Johanna is from UMass Amherst. So 3 very different individuals, very different interests, but like so keen on like being very thoughtful, very like able to take things from beginning to end and take responsibility and take initiative. And these were all things that, you know, it's hard to tell in an interview, but if someone has a good thought process and can break down problems from beginning to end, to me that was like a really good sign.
Good for you for doing that. That's great. It makes the team even stronger. I'm just being sensitive to time here a little bit. What's missing on the team, do you think? Can you point to kind of, if you could bring someone else on, what skill, what capability you think you need?
Yeah. Do you have a thought on that?
It sounds like you have the manufacturing experience, you have access to manufacturing, you have some distribution experience, marketing experience, yes?
It comes down to, do you have something? I think it comes down to what you were talking to Sarah about advisors versus team member.
That's what I was going to say as well.
And it's finding the fine line between who does what. And I think what's great about the advisors is they can provide the connections, but the team members are people who need to execute. And for us, like what we really miss, we're really good at the marketing, we're really good at talking about the idea because that's what we love and we live that and we have the passion. And we work hard all the time. But then when it comes to like having connections within the food network or the food industry, like that's something that we're missing.
Yeah.
What we found though is that it's really rare for somebody at our stage, for an experienced food entrepreneur to come in and say like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna like come work with you guys. So right now what we've done is we've taken on a lot of great food entrepreneurs or food individuals as advisors and mentors. But I think like so for right now, I think our team, we feel really good. We have 3 co-founders, and so it's not, you know, one person shouldering the responsibility. But I think eventually, you know, as we grow, like it's about, we're different from some other companies out there, but it's about having a sales team who goes out and like we're selling to a lot of different accounts, or we hire a broker. You know, these are different options we can look through. Something else is like eventually we really have to get tight on like marketing. My experience is in marketing, but like having somebody who can like focus on that all day, every day, so key for us.
In your email, I don't know if you or Taylor wrote the email, but you talked about how you've divided up responsibilities today, which is just you're tackling a piece of the problem, each of you, for now, and then it's going to change, which is, I think, is a very refreshing way to think about it.
Yeah.
Somebody has to manage the sourcing of product and get the product built. Someone has to manage the distribution side of it, and someone has to manage the marketing side of it in the brand. So, and that worked naturally for you. How did you figure that? How did that discussion happen, or did it just naturally fall out? Do you think?
I think when so being here and like in this community, there's a lot of pressure to think about what's your role. Like, are you the CEO? Are you the CMO? And like, there's a lot of pressure to think about like, oh my God, what does that mean? But we're acting as if we're like a $10 million company. And really when it comes down to it is like, we're just trying to get things done so that we can have product out and selling. And so when we looked at the summer, it was like, let's just break down our timeline and think about what are the big components that have to get done so that product can be out in the fall. And that's our goal. And it really came down to, here's supply chain. We have to make sure we have cricket flour. We have to make sure that we have manufacturing. And we have to make sure that we have distributors. And so these are 3 big aspects. There's 3 co-founders, 3 interns. So that worked out really nicely where we started.
You have to hire in 3s is what you're telling me.
We just like 3s. 3 times 2 is 6. I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out. But just once we figured out that there were like 3 components and we had very natural like tendencies towards each, it really just like worked itself out. And even though when you have I think the trouble with having 3 separate components is like, then how do you make sure that it comes back together at the end? And so having, I think, one person who can kind of take the lead on like delegating and making sure that every piece is coming together. And we have like brainstorms every day where we can talk about things. We have similar to Life Guides, except at the end of the day, we talk about, oh, what did we do today? And what needs to get done tomorrow? And just like keeping the energy up, and we have Friday check-ins with each team member about how we're feeling. And so like keeping these open lines of communication and then doing fun things. We do Thursday outings. So important. We did bouldering, bowling, karaoke. So yeah, we've done a lot
of
cool
team building
things.
stuff. Cool. Any difficult decisions you've had to embrace?
Yeah, a lot. Do you want to? Okay. Yeah, I think every step has been hard. One, our co-founders in New York. That's a really difficult relationship to manage. Is there a way, like, you know, what does that look like, and how do we make sure that we're in constant communication, and that she doesn't feel like she's out of the loop, and we feel like we can trust her. And so that's an ongoing conversation. It gets really hard sometimes. Other difficult decisions.
Is that working?
It is. So it goes up and down depending on when. Like in the summer, it's a lot better because she has more time. But she has one more year of grad school left before she can join us full time in May. And so.
Are you still in school?
I graduated.
Oh, you're both.
Yeah, so we're full time.
So you're full time. That's going to add some pressure to it then. Yeah.
Yeah. And another thing is, you know, Laura and I are giving up. We have opportunity costs deciding to do this full time. And that was a difficult decision. I had to fly home a couple weeks ago to tell my parents I'm not taking my Microsoft offer. That was hard. And there's a lot. Also, I think just like decisions like choosing chips or cookies. Those were hard decisions. Deciding. Laura and I have had. I mean, this is like bare honesty. Like we fight all the time because we're so different. Yeah. And you know. It's hard, and it's about working through these problems. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to like, are you committed to this? Like, do you have the right values? And like, do you truly trust this person? Not in terms of like your children, but like, do you believe that they have your best interest at heart? And like, I can truly, honestly say, like, I don't think that my co-founders would ever like screw me over.
Great. Yes, a couple questions from the audience.
So I want to ask about the importance of having a set location, office space, because you guys are part of the VIP here. So there's a desk and an office space right here that everybody gets together, except for your partner in New York. But prior to that, before you guys were accepted as a VIP, where did you guys exactly meet? Currently, my team, we were unfortunately rejected by iLabs, so we're actually resorting to like Panera Bread and Starbucks. Is that what you guys resorted to prior to coming here?
We actually started out at the iLab. But you're totally right that I think having a meeting place is really important. Are you Harvard students?
I'm an extension student.
Okay. I don't know how it works.
Yeah,
the
day space is open to all like full-time students, so yeah.
So that might help you in terms of, I think if you're Harvard affiliated, you have a team member who's Harvard affiliated, that you could come here and meet. It's also, it depends on where you are, but like I think it's worth investing in maybe like a co-working space, because if you do have more than one team member, like just having people in the same space, like the very like intangibles of like just like getting to know people and like having a touch base point and just being around each other and feeling that sense of accountability is pretty important.
I would agree. I think if you don't have that, it's not game over, but you got to put extra energy into ongoing, kind of recurring meetings, recurring themes. We do this on Thursdays, this on Tuesdays, and there's a pulse and a kind of an expectation of kind of opportunities to connect. If you don't have that, things quickly disintegrate.
Exactly.
Get sort of consumer feedback yet. So just talking to people, you said you just want to be another good food company, but the cricket part of it is growing, or maybe you want to leverage it. How much feedback have you had?
Right, and that's something that we've done from the very beginning is surveying and actually like, going out and talking to people on the streets. And so we've done a ton of testing. Our initial like prototype, we actually took to the streets of Cambridge in Harvard Square and just like yelled, "Hey, try our cricket chips," and we got it on film. It's for Kickstarter, and so like you could see people's reactions, like, "Oh, this is like pretty good." So like having that product testing is really important, and so like we're gonna keep doing that. And not only do we do like our own product, but what we do is like here at the iLab, for example, we like brought in a ton of different types of chips and asked people around the iLab to tell us like of these different chip flavors, like which one was their favorite and why. And so like keeping that surveying going. So like there's product testing, but then there's also just like the testing of like crickets, right? Like, is this a good idea? And we've actually had some help with this, but so really it's not a perfect survey when you ask people like what you think. It really ultimately comes down to, are they going to buy it? But it's still good to have that data. So like, for example, last weekend we went to a food show in New York, and we literally took our iPad around and just like stopped people and said like, hi, like we're college students, like can you take this survey? It was tough. Like some of our, it's always hard interrupting people, but like we got over 100 responses, and we had to do it because we're like, you know what, like this is what we want to get out of this weekend, and it's really important for us to know like who are these people, and like are they going to be interested in our product? And not only did we do that, like Yahoo actually did a survey for us. They published an article on us, and then they at the end, like short article, like a little bit of education. They asked at the end, like, would you try chips with bugs in it? And over 13,000 people responded, very general population, and over 52% of people said yes. So like, we're constantly trying to get feedback. And we have another really cool idea we came up with yesterday during our brainstorm, where we're actually going to like have chip rack, like buy a chip rack and like very early prototype of like our packaging and our product, and have just like chips like literally printed on a piece of paper, like the packaging's gonna be printed on a piece of paper on like a plastic bag, and like with chips inside, and just like see who stops by, and then ask them like, who are you? Like, why are you interested, right? And so I think what we've learned is like constantly being in touch with your consumers is really important.
Mm-hmm. I'm just sensitive to time,
Sorry,
Rose,
yes.
but thank you so much. I think we'll call it now, but thanks everybody for coming. Hope this was helpful. One last slide. Just want to thank a bunch of folks that did help. I think I have that slide here. Yes, special thanks to a number of folks that kind of helped with some of the thoughts behind the presentation. And in terms of follow-up, if folks have some specific questions, they want to reach out to me, contact info's there. And I'm around the iLab probably once or twice a week also, so track me down as well, okay? So thanks everybody for coming. Hope that was helpful.